Imagine relying on a steel beam or a safety harness only to have it fail catastrophically because the materials weren't tested to a universal standard. Look, in our line of work, unstandardized materials don't just cost money, they cost lives. I'm your host, and with over 15 years in EHS management, I can tell you firsthand that understanding standards is the absolute bedrock of our profession. Today, in this explainer, we're breaking down ASTM International, exactly what it is, how it compares to ISO, and why your site's safety and compliance literally depend on it. Let's dive right in. I really want you to think about this question in the context of your own facilities today. Whether you're a safety director, a quality manager, or an engineer, you're making major purchasing decisions every single day. You're buying PPE, you're approving structural materials, and you're signing off on critical lab testing. If the foundation of those decisions, the standards themselves, are misunderstood or misapplied, the risk profile of your entire operation absolutely skyrockets. And that brings us directly to ASTM International. We are talking about an absolute powerhouse in the world of material testing standards. ASTM International isn't just some niche technical group. It's a massive global organization representing over 12,500 voluntary consensus standards that are actively used across more than 140 countries. I mean, from the steel in your buildings framework to the protective gear on your workforce, AST's footprint is literally everywhere. So here is our playbook for today. We'll cover history and the consensus process, essential EHS safety standards, ASTM versus ISO, using standards in EHS, and finally, conclusion and takeaways. Let's get to it. Section 1. History and the consensus process. Building industrial strength. What's really fascinating here is that ASTM was actually born out of a literal crisis. Picture this. Back in 1898, the fast-growing railroad industry was suffering from frequent, catastrophic steel rail fractures. Trains were literally derailing because the steel just couldn't handle the stress. So a chemist named Charles Dudley gathered a group of engineers to fix this. He realized that a manufacturer's promise of quality essentially meant nothing without empirical, standardized testing. That group officially incorporated in 1902 as the American Society for Testing Materials. Fast forward over a century later to 2001, and they rebranded to ASTM International to reflect their massive global reach. And here's a crucial milestone for those of us in the safety field. In 2016, they acquired the Safety Equipment Institute, or SEI, expanding directly into third-party PPE certification. Now, what's really cool is how ASTM prevents corporate monopolies from dictating our safety. ASTM creates what are known as consensus standards. In their technical committees, they enforce a really strict democratic balance. The producers, meaning the companies that are actually making the materials or products, can never hold more than 50% of the voting power. The rest has to be made up of users, consumers, academia, and general interest groups. This balance ensures that safety rules prioritize public and industrial well-being, not just a manufacturer's bottom line. And the rigor of that consensus process is honestly brilliant. In most democratic systems, a simple majority wins. But in ASTM, a single negative vote from any member, provided it has a valid technical rationale, of course, stops the entire standard dead in its tracks. The committee is then forced to either modify the standard to address the concern or formally vote it down as non-persuasive by a 2/3 majority. That level of exhaustive technical review is exactly why ASTM standards are so fiercely trusted in legal and regulatory environments today. Section 2. Essential EHS Safety Standards, the codes that save lives. Look, as safety and quality managers, you obviously don't need to memorize all 12,500 standards, but you absolutely must know the heavy hitters. Take ASTM E84, for example. This is the absolute gold standard for testing the surface burning characteristics of building materials. If you're auditing a new facility build, you need to know for sure that your materials pass ASTM 84. Then we have ASTM E8 and E8M, which dictate the tension testing of metallic materials to determine yield strength, which is completely crucial for structural integrity. And let's not forget ASTM E23, the Charpy impact test, which measures a metal's ability to absorb sudden high-impact loads without fracturing. These aren't just abstract numbers on a page. They are the literal guardrails of industrial safety. And we absolutely cannot talk about the role of ASTM in safety without diving into their subsidiary, the Safety Equipment Institute, or SEI. SEI provides crucial third-party certification to ensure that PPE actually performs the way the manufacturer claims it will. When you're out there buying protective footwear for your team, for instance, you're looking for compliance with specific standards like ASTM F2413. Well, SEI is the organization that runs the annual product testing and the facility audits, to guarantee that the boots your workers are lacing up every day actually meet that standard year after year. Section 3, ASTM versus ISO, the global showdown. So let's get into the crucial part of the ASTM versus ISO debate. While both organizations are highly respected globally, their structural philosophies are completely different. ASTM is deeply prescriptive. It tells a lab exactly how to run a test, step by step, exact dimensions, exact speeds. It's heavily focused on specific materials and products, and it absolutely dominates North American procurement. ISO, on the other hand, is much more process-oriented and flexible. ISO standards often describe what outcome must be demonstrated, allowing for different ways to achieve that outcome. ISO is famous for its system-focused frameworks like ISO 9001 for quality or 45001 for occupational health and safety, and it holds incredible dominance in global regulatory markets. Let me show you exactly why you cannot just swap one standard for the other. Let's look at the testing of the tensile strength of plastics as a perfect example of this real-world showdown. ASTM D638 requires a fixed dumbbell-shaped specimen and pulls it at a constant speed to find the ultimate tensile strength. Now, ISO 527, which is trying to measure the exact same property, allows multiple specimen gauge options, starts the pull slowly, then speeds up, and often reports the strength at the first local maximum. Because the geometry and the pulling speeds differ, the resulting data differs. A plastic might look weaker or stiffer depending entirely on which standard you use to test it. You simply cannot hand European regulators ASMD data and expect them to accept it as ISO data. It doesn't work that way. So where does each standard actually win? Well, ASTM is your go-to if you're dealing with North American contracts, structural metals, or when a buyer demands absolute prescriptive precision in material testing standards. ISO wins out when you're dealing with global markets, navigating the CE marking process over in Europe, or when you need to qualify your overall management systems. The really tough reality for a lot of B2B hardware and safety manufacturers is what we call dual compliance, which means testing to both. Yeah, it absolutely doubles the upfront testing cost, but it prevents the complete nightmare of a customer rejecting your product at the 11th hour just because your data sheet is in the wrong regulatory language. Section 4. Using standards in EHS, your launch framework. All right, here is your compliance decision checklist to help you avoid those massive launch delays. Step 1, identify your target markets early on. Are you selling primarily in the US, or are you going global right out of the gate? Step 2, read the actual customer purchase specs. Do they explicitly demand ASTM, ISO, or both? Step 3, map your regulatory path. Are you aiming for FDA approval or maybe a European CE mark? And step 4, ensure you are using accredited labs, specifically those meeting the ISO/ISC 17025 standard for testing competence. I promise you, if you align your standard strategy with your market goals before the testing even begins, you will save your company incredible amounts of time and money. Now, there is a bit of good news on the horizon. We are actually seeing a trend toward global harmonization. For instance, the FDA is planning to align its quality regulations with ISO 1345 by early 2026, which is really going to help narrow the gap for medical device manufacturers. ASTM and ISO are also signing agreements to co-develop standards for emerging tech, like additive manufacturing. But until that convergence is complete across all sectors, you, as a safety professional, must deliberately and carefully manage your dual compliance strategy today. Section 5, Conclusion and Final Takeaways. I want to leave you with this thought to really chew on. In competitive hardware markets, disciplined to standards choices are often the difference between a smooth rollout and a stalled release. Whether you're auditing a facility's fire safety materials to ASTM E84 or choosing safety boots certified to ASTM F2413, your grasp of these exact standards directly protects your workforce. And when it comes to major product launches, knowing the strategic difference between ASTM and ISO is exactly what protects your company's bottom line. So I'll ask you, look around your site today. Are you building, buying, and testing to the right standard? Like, share, and subscribe to HSE Study for more high-impact safety insights.